I think it probably was the typewriter, which was a German brand, which might seem arbitrary, but by that time I knew enough about Kubrick that most anything in his films can't be regarded as arbitrary, that anything, especially objects and colors and music and anything else, probably have some intentional as well as unintentional meaning to them. And so that struck me, why a German typewriter? And in connection with that, I began to see the number 42 appear in the film. And for a German historian, if you put the number 42 and a German typewriter together, you get the Holocaust, because it was in 1942 that the Nazis made the decision to go ahead and exterminate all the Jews they could. There's a pile of suitcases, and in the dissolve into that scene, the scene before, a group of tourists are standing in the lobby, and those tourists dissolve into the suitcases. Now, as an historian of the Holocaust, I find that very, very striking, and certainly not accidental, because he's using those sort of cross dissolves. That could be, along with the latter, where he's trying to make substantive connections as well as formal ones.
In the lounge, you know, and she's being drawn up to the hexagonal hallway room, and you see Danny shining at the beginning of that. He's in his room. There's like lights flickering in his eyes. Like, is Danny drawing his mother up the stairs so that she can, sacrifice Jack on top of that, weird pyramid?
You've got Danny, he's in the game room, he turns around, we're supposed to be focused on the two girls there. And then I saw, over on the left, I see the skiing poster. And the thing is that you already have Jack, he's already asked about skiing. Well, why isn't, what about skiing? Isn't the skiing good here in the hotel? And he's already given the story of why it isn't good, why they can't do that. But you've got the skiing poster, and my eye is drawn to it, and I realize that's not a skier. That's a Minotaur. It just leaped out at me, and so that was something that I was able to look at later on VHS and say, yes, I had actually seen a Minotaur there, where the upper body, you've got this really, overblown physique, very physical physique, and then you've got the suggestion. You have a suggestion of a skiing pole there, but it's not really there. It's just a suggestion of one, and the lower body is positioned the way the legs are. It's like a Minotaur, the build is, and you've actually got a tail there, and so it is a Minotaur. And this is on the opposite side of the door, you have a cowboy on a bucking bronco. So you've got a kind of echo there, where you've got the Minotaur on one side, the bull man, and on the other side you've got the cowboy, the man on the bucking bronco. And this is just following the scene where Ullman has been taking Jack and Wendy through the Colorado Lounge, showing them off the Colorado Lounge. And they go into the hall behind the Colorado Lounge. And what's there, but on the wall, there is a painting of an American Indian with a buffalo headdress on. And at that point, Ullman is discussing with Wendy, who has stayed there at the hotel. Royalty, the best people, stars have stayed there.
Royalty?
All the best people.
You have Monarch on the bottom, which keys in with royalty. And you also have this whole idea of the stars. And the Minotaur's name is, Asterius. His name is Asterius, which means starry. So, you've got several things there to do with mythology that fit in. It's very exciting to me. It was, that's a kind of leap up and down moment where you go, oh wow, look at what Kubrick has there.
And in the first shot behind Jack sitting at his typewriter, back against a wall behind him, probably 10 or 12 or 15 feet, is a chair. And then there's a switch to a one shot of Wendy saying something.
Hey, weather forecast said it's going to snow tonight.
And then the camera switches back to Jack, and the chair is gone.
What do you want me to do about it?
And My students and I always have fun with that, saying, well, continuity error could be, or it's not. And the answer, if it's not, or if it was originally and then Kubrick saw it and decided to keep it, is that he's parodying horror films in order to remind you that this isn't just a horror film.
You know, it'll be an ad for Gilby's Gin, and inside the ice cubes will be various sex organs and things to add a subliminal appeal to the ad. You know, I'll give you my favorite. I'm only going to give you one, but I'll give you my favorite. When Jack meets Stuart Ullman in the office at the very beginning of the movie, and he reaches over to shake Jack Nicholson's hand. And so step through that scene, frame by frame, and the moment, the frame that he and Jack Nicholson touch hands, and right after the line that Barry Nelson says, which is, "Nice to see you," you can see that there's a paper tray on the desk, and as soon as they touch hands, the paper tray turns into a very large straight-on hard-on coming out of Barry Nelson. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's a joke, a very serious joke, but a joke by Stanley. And there's many of these in the film, and very disturbing, some of them.
Design on the rug shows basically the most, in geometric form with round curves, the act of intercourse itself, one after another, after another, after another, sort of like a picture of down through the generations of what produces life. You go back out in the hallway, in the larger society, and the round curves of that very same design have become hexagons, not so nice and round and a little bit more like the beehive hexagon, but down the whole corridors of history. I think he's got an image of it there. So he's talking about the family of man, both in an individual nuclear family and in the whole course of our genetic history.
You go through the frames right after it says directed by Stanley Kubrick. As soon as his name passes off the frame, stop, and you will see that the clouds have Stanley Kubrick airbrushed into them, his face, with the beard and the wild hair and the whole thing. You know, this one's a little harder to find, and I will have to Photoshop this one to show people it, but there is definitely a photograph of Stanley Kubrick in one frame, airbrushed in to the clouds.
And sits there looking sort of dour and resentful and quiet, and whose skin color is sort of half, it's not white, it's sort of toward brown. I've always thought that he sort of represents somebody from a subdued race. He seems a little bit diffident.
He is the silent guardian for the government. Stuart Ullman represents the face of the U.S. government, and that's why Kubrick gave him the toupee that makes him look like John F. Kennedy. And I think he is the guy who's silently watching everything, and CIA, I guess, kind of NSA guy. He's got the Apollo 11 sweater on. He begins walking down the hallway towards room 237, and there's a key in the lock, and on the key is the words room and then the word NO, which is an old acronym for number, so room number 237, except that the only capital letters on the key are ROOM and then the N from the acronym NO. And if there's only two words that you can come up with that have those letters in them, and that's moon and room. And so on the key, the tag, it says moon room. And this deeper story has its birth, I guess, in the idea that Stanley Kubrick was involved with faking the Apollo moon landings. I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. I'm just saying that what we saw was faked, and that it was faked by Stanley Kubrick.